You ever wonder what happens to the soldiers who never come home? Not the ones who died fighting. I'm talking about the ones who just disappeared, like they were swallowed up by the earth itself. 50 men, one platoon, gone without a single trace. No bodies, no dog tags, no answers. Just questions that keep folks awake at night, wondering if some battles never really end. Korea, 1951. The Forgotten War, they call it now. Sandwiched between the glory of World War II and the controversy of Vietnam. But for the boys who fought there, it was hell on frozen ground. Mountains that seemed to touch the sky, valleys that swallowed sound, and winters so cold, your breath would freeze before it left your lips. This was no place for the living. Charlie Company, 3rd Battalion, 50 young Americans, most barely old enough to shave. Boys from Iowa cornfields and Brooklyn brownstones. They had names like Jimmy and Frank and Bobby. They had sweethearts back home and dreams of hot apple pie. They were somebody's sons, somebody's whole world. And then, one November morning, they became nobody at all. The mission was routine, or so they said. Recon patrol along Hill 343, a godforsaken piece of real estate that changed hands more times than a poker chip. Intelligence reported enemy movement, needed boots on the ground, eyes on the situation, simple in and out, be back by nightfall. That's what Lieutenant Morrison told his boys. That's what he believed anyway. November 18th, 1951. 0600 hours. 50 men stepped off that base like they'd done 100 times before. Locked and loaded, spirits decent enough for a freezing Tuesday morning. Sergeant Peterson cracked jokes about the Korean weather. Private Collins talked about his girl back in Tennessee. Normal soldier talk. Normal soldier worries. Nothing that suggested they were walking into something, the terrain up there. It's like God himself took a hammer to the world and left the pieces where they fell. Jagged rocks that could slice a man open. Ravines so deep you couldn't see the bottom. And the mist. Christ, the mist. It moved like something alive, reaching out with ghostly fingers, swallowing everything whole. Local Koreans had stories about that place, stories they wouldn't tell American soldiers. The last radio transmission came at 14:30 hours. Morrison's voice, calm and professional. Base, this is Charlie 3, approaching objective, no visual on enemy positions, beginning sweep. Routine stuff. Nothing that raised any red flags back at command. But if you listen real close to that recording, and I mean really close, you can hear something else. Something that shouldn't have been there. Silence. That's what came next. Not the kind of quiet you get when men are being tactical. This was different. This was the kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, that makes you check over your shoulder even when you know nobody's there. The radio operator at base tried raising them every 15 minutes. Static. Just static and that damned Korean wind. By 1800 hours, somebody finally decided something was wrong. Charlie Company was 6 hours overdue, and in Korea, 6 hours could mean the difference between coming home and becoming a memory. Search teams went out immediately. Helicopters, ground patrols, even some local guides who knew the mountain like their own backyard. They searched till their eyes bled and their feet gave out. Nothing. 50 men don't just vanish into thin air, but that's exactly what happened. No bodies, no blood trails, no signs of a firefight. Hell, they didn't even find spent shell casings. It was like Charlie Company had walked into that mountain and simply ceased to exist. The only thing left behind was questions and a feeling that something fundamental about what they did find was scattered equipment. A radio here, a helmet there. But here's the thing that made seasoned soldiers wake up in cold sweats. The gear was placed, not dropped. Arranged almost ceremonially along the ridgeline, like markers in some twisted game. No soldier abandons his weapon unless he's dead, and dead men don't arrange their equipment in perfect geometric patterns. The Army launched a full investigation, brought in experts from every relevant field, forensic specialists, tactical analysts, even psychiatrists to evaluate potential mass hysteria scenarios. They interviewed every soldier on that base, checked every record, followed every possible lead. The conclusion? 50 American soldiers had encountered something that defied military logic, something that didn't belong in any field manual. The Korean villagers weren't surprised. They'd been trying to tell the Americans for months about that mountain, about things that lived in the mist, things that had been there long before armies marched across those hills. Hungry ghosts, the old woman in Yangju village called them. Spirits of warriors who died in battles so ancient, history forgot their names. But the Americans, they thought it was just superstition. Aerial reconnaissance had taken photographs of the search area, standard procedure. But when those photos were developed, they showed something that made hardened intelligence officers reach for their whiskey bottles. Shadows where there should have been none. Figures that weren't there when the plane flew over. And in one photograph, taken just after sunrise, what looked like 50 men standing in perfect formation, in an area they'd already searched 3 times. Years later, soldiers from other units started coming forward. Quiet conversations in VFW halls, whispered stories over beers. Men who swore they'd seen Charlie Company marching through the Korean hills decades after the war ended, always in the mist, always in perfect formation, always heading toward Hill 343, like they were trapped in some eternal patrol. Private Davis from Bravo Company recorded something 3 weeks after the disappearance. He was on guard duty, about 2 miles from Hill 343. His tape recorder picked up what sounded like military radio chatter, orders being given, men responding. The voices were faint, distorted by distance and static, but audio specialists confirmed it. Those voices belonged to members of Charlie Company. Dead air doesn't carry the voices of missing men. Meteorologists noticed something strange about Hill 343. Temperature readings that didn't match surrounding areas. Electromagnetic anomalies that screwed with radio equipment. Fog that appeared and disappeared without regard to weather conditions. The mountain seemed to generate its own microclimate, as if the laws of physics worked differently there. As if reality itself had been altered somehow. The psychological profiles of Charlie Company revealed nothing unusual. No history of mental illness, no signs of combat stress severe enough to cause mass breakdown. These were solid soldiers, mentally tough, trained to handle pressure. Whatever happened to them, it wasn't something that could be explained by battlefield psychology or combat fatigue. Something external had acted upon them, something beyond normal human experience. The Army sent in a replacement platoon 2 months later. Different objective, different route, but the same general area. Those men reported strange things immediately. Equipment malfunctioning without cause, compass needles spinning wildly. And at night, when the mist rolled in, they swore they could hear voices calling out grid coordinates in perfect military cadence. Grid coordinates that led to empty ground. Night vision equipment started picking up heat signatures in the search area, human-shaped thermal readings moving in military formation across the mountainside. But when ground teams investigated, they found nothing, just cold earth and that omnipresent mist. The thermal signatures appeared almost nightly, always following the same patrol route Charlie Company had been assigned, an eternal mission, with no Chaplain Williams had conducted memorial services for Charlie Company. 50 empty coffins, 50 grieving families. He'd done his duty, said the right words, offered the appropriate comfort. But months later, he started receiving letters. Not from families of the deceased, from the soldiers themselves. Letters postmarked from locations that didn't exist, written in handwriting that matched military records. Letters asking why nobody had come to bring them home. Forensic analysts studied soil samples from Hill 343. The mineral composition was wrong. Elements that shouldn't exist naturally, arranged in patterns that defied geological explanation. It was as if the very ground had been fundamentally altered at a molecular level. The earth itself had become something alien, something that didn't belong to this world, something that might have the power to make men disappear. Time worked differently on Hill 343. Soldiers reported watches stopping, then starting again with wrong times. radio transmissions that arrived hours before they were sent, sunrise occurring at sunset coordinates. Linear time seemed to break down in that area, creating pockets where past, present, and future existed simultaneously. Where November 18, 1951 might still be happening, playing out in an endless loop. Declassified documents from decades later revealed the truth the Army had tried to hide. Charlie Company wasn't the first unit to disappear from Hill 343. During the Japanese occupation of Korea, an entire battalion had vanished from the same area. Before that, Chinese troops. Before that, Mongol warriors. The mountain had been consuming soldiers for centuries, adding them to some invisible army that marched in the mist. A pattern emerged when researchers examined historical records. Every 20 to 30 years, military units would vanish from Hill 343. Different armies, different wars, but always the same result. Soldiers would march into that area and never return. The survivors, when there were any, always told the same story. Mist that moved with intelligence, voices calling from empty air, the feeling of being watched by eyes that had seen too much death. Electronic equipment behaved erratically near Hill 343. Radios picked up conversations from decades past. Radar showed aircraft that weren't there. Even simple compasses would spin wildly before pointing toward the mountain, as if some massive electromagnetic anomaly lay buried beneath the rock and earth. An anomaly that had the power to reach across time itself and pull the living into the realm of the lost. Kim Soo-jin was 93 when researchers finally found him, the last surviving witness to the Japanese disappearance in 1943. Through a translator, he told them about the hungry mountain that ate soldiers. He'd watched entire companies march into the mist and never emerge. The mountain was cursed, he said, cursed by the ghosts of all the warriors who died on its slopes, and it would never stop feeding. Modern expeditions with advanced technology have attempted to solve the mystery. Ground-penetrating radar, thermal imaging, electromagnetic field detectors. But the technology fails consistently in that area. Batteries drain instantly. Equipment malfunctions without explanation. It's as if the mountain itself rejects any attempt to understand its secrets. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved by men with machines. The families never stopped searching. Mothers who refused to believe their sons were dead. Fathers who spent their life savings hiring private investigators. Wives who waited decades for husbands who would never walk through the door. They organized search parties, lobbied politicians, demanded answers from a military that had no answers to give. Their love became a kind of haunting itself. Paranormal researchers have proposed numerous theories: interdimensional portals, time loops, mass possession by entities that exist outside normal reality. While the military dismisses such explanations, they can't provide better ones. 50 men don't simply disappear unless something beyond human understanding makes them disappear. Something that operates by rules we haven't learned yet. Veterans who served in Korea report the same recurring dream. They're marching with Charlie Company through the mist on Hill 343. The soldiers are talking, laughing, acting normal, but their faces are wrong. Their eyes are empty. And when the dreamer tries to leave the formation, he realizes he can't. He's part of the patrol now, part of something that will march forever through a landscape that exists somewhere between life and death. The vegetation around Hill 343 grows in perfect geometric patterns. Circles, squares, formations that don't occur naturally. In some areas, nothing grows at all. Dead zones where the earth itself seems poisoned by something that has no name. Local animals avoid the area entirely. Even birds change course when flying overhead, as if some instinct warns them away from airspace that belongs to the dead. In 1978, journalist Sarah Mackenzie spent 3 months investigating the Charlie Company disappearance. She interviewed survivors, studied classified documents, hiked Hill 343 with local guides. Her final article was never published. The night before her deadline, she called her editor to say she'd found something extraordinary, something that changed everything she thought she knew about reality. Her notes were found scattered across her hotel room. She was never seen again. Audio enthusiasts using sensitive recording equipment have captured hours of conversation from Hill 343. Military orders, casual talk between soldiers, radio chatter from units that disappeared decades ago. The voices overlap, creating a cacophony of ghost communications from different time periods. It's as if the mountain has become a recording device, preserving the final moments of every unit that vanished into its mist. Psychic medium Rebecca Torres visited Hill 343 in 1985 at the request of Charlie Company families. Within minutes of arriving, she began speaking in voices that weren't her own. Military terminology she shouldn't have known. Names that matched missing soldier records. She described being trapped in a place where time moves in circles, where November 18th, 1951 never ends. Where 50 men are still following orders from officers who themselves don't understand what they... Freedom of Information Act requests have revealed extensive government knowledge of Hill 343 anomalies. Military scientists studied the area for decades, documenting phenomena they couldn't explain. The official policy became containment rather than investigation. Keep civilians away, deny everything. Pretend that 50 American soldiers hadn't walked into a hole in reality and emerged somewhere else entirely. Frank Morrison Jr. was 8 years old when his father disappeared with Charlie Company. He enlisted in Vietnam, hoping military training would help him understand what happened on Hill 343. After his service, he spent 40 years researching the disappearance. His conclusion: something lives in that mountain. Something that collects soldiers like trophies. My dad's still there, still following orders from something that wears the face of command, but isn't human anymore. Theoretical physicist Dr. James Chen has studied the Hill 343 phenomenon for decades. His theory involves dimensional overlap, points where multiple realities intersect. According to his calculations, Hill 343 exists simultaneously in several timelines, creating a kind of temporal trap. Soldiers don't disappear. They step sideways into a dimension where the Korean War never ended, where they're doomed to fight a battle that has no victory condition. A memorial now stands at the base of Hill 343. 50 names carved in black granite, dates of birth, but no dates of death, because officially, these men are still missing in action. Families leave flowers, letters, photographs. Sometimes, on misty November mornings, visitors report seeing additional figures standing near the memorial. Figures in 1950s military uniforms who fade when approached. Modern hikers and tourists still report unexplained encounters. Cell phone footage that shows nothing when played back. Conversations with soldiers who provide detailed accounts of Korean War battles, then vanish when asked their names. GPS devices that show coordinates for locations that don't exist on any map. The phenomenon continues, suggesting whatever took Charlie Company remains active, still hunting. The military maintains official silence about Hill 343. Standard responses about classified information and operational security. But privately, military historians acknowledge the case represents something beyond conventional explanation. Some battles leave scars that never heal. Some places become infected with death itself. Hill 343 is one of those places, ground zero for a mystery that challenges everything we think we know about reality. Scientists have conducted temporal experiments near Hill 343, atomic clocks that run backward, light that bends around empty space, electromagnetic readings that suggest the presence of massive objects where nothing exists. The laws of physics seem negotiable in that area, as if reality operates under different rules that might allow the past to reach into the present and claim what belongs to it. Local Korean children who've never been taught about Charlie Company draw pictures of American soldiers. Always 50 figures, always in perfect formation, always marching through mist. When asked where they learned about these soldiers, the children point toward Hill 343 and say the same thing. They told us their story. They're waiting for someone to bring them home. Out of the mouths of babes comes truth that adults refuse to acknowledge. Quantum mechanics suggests that observation changes reality. Perhaps Hill 343 represents a place where this principle operates on a macro scale, where the act of military observation, reconnaissance patrols, surveillance missions, fundamentally alters the nature of space and time, where looking for the enemy creates an enemy that exists outside normal reality, an enemy that feeds on soldiers themselves. Researchers have enhanced Lieutenant Morrison's final transmission using modern audio technology. Behind his words, almost inaudible, other voices can be heard. Orders in languages that predate English. Battle cries from wars that ended centuries ago. The suggestion that Hill 343 is home to every soldier who ever died there, from every conflict, across all of time. Morrison's platoon simply joined a formation that began marching long before religious leaders across denominations have studied the Charlie Company case. Christian theologians speak of purgatory made manifest. Buddhist monks discuss the concept of hungry ghosts seeking resolution. Native American shamans recognize the signs of a place where the spirit world bleeds into the physical realm. Every culture has words for what Hill 343 represents. Sacred ground corrupted by too much death, too much violence, too much unfinished business. Military historian Dr. Amanda Cross has developed what she calls the collector theory. Hill 343, she argues, has become a kind of supernatural museum, preserving soldiers from every era as interactive exhibits in some cosmic display of human warfare. The mountain doesn't kill, it curates. It adds new specimens to its collection, keeping them alive in a state between life and death, forever frozen at the moment of their disappearance. What happened to Charlie Company has implications for modern military operations. If places like Hill 343 exist, battlefields that have become permanently stained with death, how many soldiers are we still losing to phenomena we don't understand? How many missing in action reports actually represent encounters with something that exists outside the normal world? The Pentagon won't say, but the pattern suggests Charlie Company wasn't the end of the story. They say that on certain November mornings, when the mist rolls thick across Hill 343, you can still see them. 50 American soldiers in perfect formation, marching their eternal patrol, still following orders from officers who don't remember issuing them, still searching for an enemy that might be time itself, still believing they'll return to base by nightfall, unaware that nightfall came and went 70 years ago. So what really happened to Charlie Company? Did they step through a crack in reality? Were they claimed by some supernatural force that feeds on soldiers? Are they still out there, somewhere between yesterday and tomorrow, marching through dimensions we can't see? Maybe the real question isn't what happened to them. Maybe it's this: if 50 men can vanish without a trace, what else is out there waiting to claim us? And when the mist rolls in, who decides who comes home? Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to remind us that the world is stranger and more dangerous than we dare imagine. Charlie Company learned that lesson.